Chris, we had this comment come in overnight and it's so beautifully written. Wanted to read it. It's from user halfxbreed23. And they write, I think a lot of writers have an obsession with their characters, which keeps the story from growing because they're too in love with them. Nothing is greater than the story. Nobody is greater than the story. Story is the sun, characters are flowers. The story allows characters to bloom.
I love that. I love that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's right. Characters are in service to story. And by story, we don't mean plot. The story is the totality of the characters doing what they do as they struggle with all of the challenges they face. And a beautiful line that doesn't support the story has got to be cut. I think one of the great challenges is, after I've said we should, dig into our own defining moments, when we base a character on ourselves and it becomes too autobiographical, that can limit us. Because one of the things we have to look at are the character's flaws and complexities. And I don't want to think about my complexities, my contradictions. Where am I a hypocrite? Put that on the page for the world. So if I'm not willing to let the character and the story go where they need to, I can end up kind of wrapping duct tape around that character and preventing them from pursuing their own life. And this sounds absurd unless you're a writer. Characters will surprise us. Characters say things we did not know they were going to say. That's such an electric, exciting moment when that happens. I can't quite explain how that happens. And yes, if we treat our characters like, the whatever antique Barbie and Ken dolls that we don't want to take out of their boxes because they're too valuable in their perfection, we will hamper the story that could unfold if we let them cut loose a little bit.
It's a great analogy, yeah. So being too precious, like you have your collection up there and you can show it, but you can't really do anything with it.
Right, yeah, you got to get the dolls out of the boxes and play with them. And that's the point of all of this character development, is to get to the place where we can now get them out and play with them and put the astronaut doll in the Gemini capsule and blast it off and see what happens. And let Barbie and Ken fight it out and see what happens. That's the play that happens when we get past all this character development and we actually start writing pages. That's where the fun is. That's where the life comes. So character development is not an end in itself. The story is the end.
Chris, I heard you say in maybe a Michael Wiese video that a story is a hero's struggle against an obstacle to reach a goal.
Yes. So I first came across that quote from television writer Bill Idelson reading an article in the Writers Guild magazine. And I just have found that to be the E=mc² of the physics of storytelling. It gives us three elements. It gives us our hero, it gives us a goal, and then the obstacles against which the hero struggles. That's not everything that happens in story, but it allows us to understand at an elemental level what is happening in the story. So in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, it's the story of Abraham Lincoln struggling against all of the forces of the U.S. House of Representatives, who don't want to outlaw slavery, to pass an amendment to the United States Constitution outlawing slavery. Now, I didn't try. I just gave you the hero goal obstacle, but I gave you a log line for the movie. And the log line was just the hero goal obstacle dynamic put into a sentence. it brings the story into focus. It identifies the single action that Aristotle said that a drama needs to be about. And it puts the focus on the character's struggle. So if a story is the hero's struggle against an obstacle to reach a goal, then the story juice is in the struggle. And we want to spend most of our page count dramatizing that struggle. That gives us force and focus for a story. It helps us know what the story is, so we can judge what serves the story and what doesn't, what's a distraction. I just find it to be such a clarifying lens. A story is not only that, there's also, Claudia Hunter Johnson wrote a great book called Crafting Short Screenplays That Connect. And she talks about the power of connection and disconnection between characters and how much emotion comes from connection. You can think about a touch, a kiss as a connection, or two characters whose eyes meet and they realize against all odds they're actually on the same side, or a disconnection, a betrayal. And just to say betrayal, we feel the emotion that goes with that. And then there are missed connections, near misses, longed for connections that never happen. All of that swirls around heroes struggling toward goals against obstacles. So I find that to be so useful when I'm figuring out the structure of a whole movie or the structure of an individual scene. We can think about even the sprawling 3 movies or 3 books of Lord of the Rings. It's all about Frodo carrying a ring to Mount Doom to destroy it, struggling against all the forces of Mordor. It's a single action across all 3 3-hour-long movies. And the filmmakers never lose sight of what the story is. The story is Frodo struggling against the forces of Mordor to destroy the ring. Lots of stuff happens in that movie. And we actually kind of feel the energy drain when we step away from that central thread. When we're with Merry and Pippin in the trees, we sort of feel the temperature turn down on the urgency and the focus of that. Tom Bombadil, which for readers of the book, they know there's maybe 100 pages about some guy named Tom Bombadil. Has nothing to do with Frodo trying to get rid of that ring. And so rightly that just falls out of the movies because it doesn't serve the imperative of movies, which is all about what happens next. And hero goal obstacle helps us to know what we mean when we say, well, what happens next? Is what happens next as the hero struggling toward the goal.
And forgive me, you talked about this other movie, and is that Blood Diamond?
Yes.
Okay, and I have not seen it, but if I'm keeping with what I believe you said was sort of this premise, it seems like their common goal is this diamond or these diamond mines and having access to them.
Well, so in this case, we've got 2 protagonists. We've got Leonardo DiCaprio, whose goal is make all the money he can from these diamonds. And then Djimon Hounsou, whose goal is rescue my son. And so here we've got 2 stories that intersect. And so we could call that, I think Robert McKee calls that a multi-protagonist story, which is to say you've got multiple protagonists, each with their own goal, and they succeed or fail individually. You can also have buddy movies or movies with several people on a team all struggling toward the same goal, and they succeed or fail together. And McKee calls those plural protagonist movies. Plural protagonist movies are more of the classic structure that we see in, say, Hollywood movies. Multi-protagonist movies are more art house things. They're much harder to do. But you know those movies like Crash and Traffic and Magnolia. That's where you see, and Babel, multi-protagonist movies.
Sure.
And I think that's what's going on with Blood Diamond.
Right. And so the real goal, though, isn't this diamond. The real goal is the realization that this father loves his son and he's trying to save him from...
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You've got sort of your stated goal. I'm going to rescue my son. I'm going to get that diamond. Some characters have the wrong goal, or their need for growth is far more important than their stated goal. Leonardo DiCaprio's goal, he's got the wrong goal. He just wants to be rich. He wants diamonds. That's the wrong goal. What he really needs to do is find something that is worth more than diamonds, and that's people, that's love. And he does. So the audience recognizes that, and they say, oh, you didn't get your goal, but you grew in the way you needed to, so I can still feel good about that. But if you die along the way, it's bittersweet, and so that's cool. You know, it's not the neat bow. Whereas Djimon Hounsou, the dad who's looking to rescue his son, it's not really a story about his inner growth. For him, we are invested in him actually achieving his goal of rescuing his son, which will require his son's transformation. So that's where we get the transformation and the emotion that accompanies that in that story. And those two end up being intertwined at the end, but they unfold independently for the first good part of that movie.
You said that mostly art house cinema does sort of like these multi-protagonist films.
Well, if you've got a multi-protagonist film, it is going to be probably less of a blockbuster. And so, yes, you may end up having an art house film if you do that. Mostly studio films are going to be the more classic single story that we're telling, whether with one protagonist or many working together. So like a multi or a plural protagonist story, a lot of protagonists working together would be the Ocean's 11, 12, 13 movies. You've got a team of people who are all trying to pull off the same heist, and they succeed or fail together.